Good evening. Hello. Okay, for the estimate of reservoir volume for the CBA report or any other reports you may have seen is that all the projections that are used, including in the CBA report, are going to be reliant on everyone's on professional opinion and assumptions. There are a lot of assumptions that go into these reservoir volumes. There is limited to almost no data exactly what the geology and the amount of oil is underneath the Hermosa Beach. What is used, though, is the adjacent oil field under the city of Redondo Beach. That's where a great quantity of data does exist, though it would be nice if there was more. Based on that information in Redondo Beach, is that there was an estimate for the reservoir volume, and the estimate of oil in place, as you can see, is different than what we'll be talking about a little bit in a second, is recoverable oils. How much oil is in the ground isn't necessarily how much oil will come out of the ground. So how much oil, based on the CBA report, is 115 million barrels in the tidelands and 32 million barrels in the uplands.
Councilman Figueroa, do you want to start?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You're welcome. Curtis, I think you made a reference to the estimates are, or the calculations are based on estimates and assumptions, and we don't have a whole lot of data, or it would be nice to have more data or more facts. Is there information missing from Redondo Beach that you would like to have to evaluate that information? When you say that there's not a whole lot there, we wish we had more, can you expand on that?
On each of the wells that I had in my hand for Redondo Beach, it had available log information. Log information is usually an electrical device that's sent down a hole that can tell geologists, engineer where the sand and shale layers. It also can tell where there could be or would be oil present. Absent that, there is production data, of course, for Redondo Beach, but what I could not find is actual core information. What that is they will drill out a section of the ground and actually bring it to surface. And what that allows geologists to do is actually tie that log information to actual physical information, where the log information is a representation of what's in the ground. Until you see what's in the ground, sand, shale, it's hard to tie those two things together. And so I could not find any core information. Could not find much pressure data except for the initial pressure of the well. I didn't have the breakdown of production prior to 1977 for any of the wells. A lot of those wells were drilled in the 50s. Can't think of what else, but there's probably more.
Okay, thank you. It's my understanding that there's, we just located some data from Redondo Beach production that we didn't have when the initial draft report was issued. Does that new data give you any new information or question marks to the existing data that you think needs to be reevaluated?
There was a time constraint on how much information I could look at. I mean, the production data, could it add to more of analysis? The problem with production data, even if I had it all in my hand, is that, again, those wells are drilled in the 50s, 60s, 70s. The oil price, when those wells were drilled, is a completely different world than it is now. So we're talking price of barrel, $10, 15 barrels, maybe 20 at times. So how much capital investment went in and how many wells they drilled and how much time they spent working those wells over would be a different scenario than now when you have $100 a barrel. So just taking that production information just as a static number, that is something that couldn't really be done. You'd have to take that information and do some interpolations with it to try to come out with what could be projected to come out of Hermosa Beach. Does that add to the study? It may very well just come out the same sort of flavor that the CBA report has now. It may not add anything more. But it's still going to be interpretive is the problem. It's not a number you can take just as it is.
And again, I think to be fair to Mr. Henderson, we have been getting this data coming in just in the last 3 or 4 days, so the team has not been all through it, but at least you have his initial assessment of that.
So I think to close the loop on that, if you have the data that you have now and you have more time to evaluate it, is it likely to come up with different results? And I think just to follow up on the introduction that Tom gave, so speaking only on behalf of myself, I'm not going to be telling you guys what assumptions to make and what judgments to make and what evaluations to consider and what conclusions to come up with. So that's not my question. My question is, if you have new data that you didn't have now and you have enough time to evaluate it, is it likely to result in a different conclusion and a different result than the existing draft that justifies us to ask you to basically go back and spend the time to evaluate that?
I can't say whether it be likely or not. I mean, I haven't seen the data. I haven't really taken a look. So for me to say if it's likely, I don't know.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.